Um, with that said, I wanted to get started. First of all, before we even begin, I have to sort of, give kudos to the staff. They have really been working hard with us to sort of come up with some draft recommendations that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. And we're looking forward to hearing your insights and the community's input over the coming weeks as they have a chance to review the draft recommendations, which have been posted on the city's website. So people will be able to go in and at their leisure, sort of review things and provide us with comments. So, but the staff has worked really hard to help us get here, and I want to acknowledge that and thank them for that. Next slide. So the purpose of the meeting tonight. So while the pros plan is looking at parks, outdoor recreation, and open space, the focus of tonight really is with regards to the park system. We'll have future meetings where we focus on other areas, but it's a big topic, a whole pros plan. And so we've broken down into sort of, individual sort of segments. So tonight we'll be sharing you the efforts to date to sort of create a plan that's tailored to the Belmont community and is a reflection of your community's priorities and expectations. It's very important that this isn't some generic document, that it really represents what Belmont wants, because you're much more likely to be successful if it's really an outgrowth of what the community wants and needs. So we'll be sharing with you how we've come up with some of the standards we're recommending and what we see as some of the gaps in your existing system, as well as some strategies in the second half of how you might address those gaps. I apologize in advance. This is sort of a long presentation. We'll kind of stop halfway through to see if the committee has any clarifying comments. We're asking the public to hold their comments to the very end of the presentation, just so that we have a chance to sort of give an overview to the whole thing. And as I said, we're happy to take comments tonight, but we really recognize that people probably want to have a chance to review things and thoughtfully provide their input to us, maybe visit a park site as they're looking at them. So with that said, let's jump in. So just want to sort of, as a reminder, for maybe some of you who haven't been participating in these meetings, sort of the role of the advisory committee. The committee is providing input to the consultant team. They give us insights. They were created by the city to represent a cross section of the interests and viewpoints within the Belmont community. So they give the consultant teams insights. Also, they help facilitate outreach and reaching out to the community, letting people know about the opportunities to participate, really gathering input, and they advise the process. We take the information we get from the community and the advisory committee and, fine tune that, but then we go to the Park and Recreation Commission and the City Council to receive final direction. We will share with them the input we've had from the committee and from the community at large as we move forward. So that's the role of the advisory committee. And as I said, I'm really happy to have such a diverse group that shares insight with us as we move through this process. Next slide. So we started this plan, last October. It's a year ago, and we've, slowly been moving through assessing the existing conditions, reaching out to the community. We had a community survey. We have some draft recommendations to the park system. We'll be collecting community input on that, working through the open space system. And we don't expect to have something available for adoption till spring of next year. As you can see through that green thing at the bottom, throughout this whole process, we will be continuing to seek input from the community to review different recommendations and ideas and such like that. So right now we're sort of 1 year into the process, and we don't expect to be done until next year. Thank you. Next slide. So when Belmont sort of first came to us and talked about their park system, we talked about they wanted to make a park system that is basically Belmont's backyard, that's accessible to all people, that's interesting to all the variety of interests in the community, really creating a place that's not just your local park, but you reach out to different parks in the community. Each one has unique aspects and you get to know your community through the parks and open space system, that it becomes sort of the unifying theme for the city of Belmont. As I said, the backyard, that personal level. And we've gotten a lot of feedback on that. And that's what I say, to sort of create that tailored plan, that connected plan. Next slide. So one of the things that's actually great about Belmont is currently there is a park or a joint use school or a trailhead within a 5 to 7 minute walk of the majority of residences within Belmont. As you can see by this walkshed diagram, a little bit along the northern edge, some of those people have a little further walk, but when you look at that, you should be proud as a community that you have that grade of coverage and such. But it's not just enough that you have a park, as I said, within a 5-minute walk of you, because we don't expect you just to use the park within a 5-minute walk of you. We hope that encourages you to get outside and walk to your park, but we want to make sure that you feel connected to the whole park system. So in the next slide, the city since 2016 has developed a pedestrian and bike master plan that's really emphasizing that kind of connectivity. So here's showing to you where we have some existing pedestrian circulation and where they're proposing to develop bike and ped circulation to really increase that connectivity. And you see how by adding those paths and reaching up into sort of the areas that do not have a park system, suddenly they have greater access to park or moving from one park to the next. So we've looked at sort of, this is the pedestrian network that park and recreation, the bike and pedestrian master plans envision. And with the next slide, there's also, in addition to that, a bicycle system. So you've got both a pedestrian network and a bicycle network that really starts to link the whole community together. In the bicycle network, they talk about class 1, class 2, class 3 bikes. Just for those who don't know the difference for them, a class 1 is actually a separate, multi-use pathway that's not attached to the road. A class 2 is when you create a bike lane, a separate bike lane on the road. And a class 3 is like a sort of lower volume street where the bicycle and the car sort of share the road, and some of sort of the more quiet residential streets. But as you can see, we already have this great foundation of good access to the parks, at a neighborhood level, and then great structure that starts unifying the whole park system. So it connects all the neighborhoods into a community and fabric. Next slide. So as I said before, we will be sharing with you some of our efforts today. The last time we met, we chatted with you about some of the analysis we've done of the existing park system and conditions and some of the online survey results. Since then, we've been continuing to work with the community and conducted a number of focus groups. We've also gone out and looked at some of the peer communities to see what their standards are, to understand how Belmont compares. And we've used this to sort of create some tailored park typologies for the city of Belmont. And those are some of the things we'll be sharing with you tonight. Next slide. So as you recall the last time, we had talked about what the Belmont community is prioritizing when they visit their park system. They want to, get physical exercise, they want to interact with nature, and they want to gather with families and friends. And so a lot of the thoughts with the existing parks is how do we enhance those experiences? They also talked about the things they wanted to see to enhance the experience. So that, some of it was maintaining the trail canopies. They wanted to add more shade, more trees, more pathways, more restrooms, more places to see it, and then sort of specific amenities. We talked about bike tracks and things like that. So in addition to the community survey, we've also been working with the staff to find out about participation levels in various sports and activities, requests that have been coming in over the last several years for different kinds of amenities, so that they could provide us insights not only on this moment in time, but historically what some of the demands have been, so we could synthesize all that information about the Belmont needs. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we also met with some focus groups, and some of this was driven by, in the beginning, when we met with the city, they talked about what some of their priorities were for the Belmont park system. And one was to create strong partnerships, which has been going on between the school district and youth sports. So we wanted to study that partnership relationship because that's one of the priorities of the community. They also wanted to create sort of an inclusive system that was welcoming to people of all abilities and all ages, both sort of teens and seniors and youth and such. So we met specifically some of these groups to make sure we were addressing their needs so that we can make sure it was a truly inclusive system. And then we also met with some groups like, dog parks and some emerging trends that are, have been recognized to find out what's happening there and what we need to enhance those experiences. So these are kinds of things to sort of do a deeper dive to make sure that it wasn't just about providing facilities, but was about providing the experiences in park system that is right for Belmont. Next slide. So in addition to that, we looked at what was going on in some of the communities around us, like how do we compare? So we looked at Burlingame, San Carlos, and Saratoga. We sort of selected those cities because they had similar demographics to the Belmont community. And where we're not able to benchmark or compare our place with all types of facilities, because a lot of times there's not standards in different facilities, we did collect some information on that and also on the standards typically found in the state of California and national standards. And so what this is showing is how many of those facilities are provided per 1,000 people. And Belmont are the bright green rectangles. And as you can see, Belmont has historically had a high priority in providing these kind of amenities for their population. So they have more basketball courts, more athletic fields, more playgrounds, a little bit more reservable picnics than some of the peer communities. The only place where we saw that maybe they were lower was in the number of tennis courts they had. So once again, when we think about developing standards for Belmont for now and into the future, we want to make sure this high standard that you've already established, we maintain as your population grows. So that's one of the driving factors to keep, that's what's special about Belmont, and we want to make sure we keep that special sort of flavor. Next slide. So in starting to create some standards for Belmont, we really looked and sort of found that you had multiple kinds of park typologies. So you have the sort of community parks that service the whole neighborhood. And, and we looked at creating and defining what baseline amenities had to be to qualify as a community park, a tier 1 or a tier 2 park. And then we would add amenities. So you have at one end of the spectrum, a community park, and that would be like Twin Pines, a Barrett Community Center that serves all the visitors, has high level of use, is accessed by foot, bike, car, and has a larger radius of capture. On the opposite end, you have sort of the neighborhood parks at the tier 1 that are really mostly geared towards the local neighborhood, primarily accessed by foot or bike, sort of a small kind of personal level, typically would have opportunities to interact with nature, a sort of seating area to interact with your neighbors, and maybe one recreation element in it. So it's really geared towards that very local neighborhood. The tier 2 parks have all the characteristics of the tier 1, but they also add an amenity that might have a broader appeal. An example of that might be Cipriani Park, where you have a dog park that, where it's used by the local neighborhood, but you might have people from outside the neighborhood also using that park. So it has a little bit wider capture range and might also be accessed by car. Patricia Wharton would be an example of a tier 1 park. So just people understand that. So not all parks are equal. And in fact, that's part of what makes Belmont special. You have all these different unique kinds of parks you go to for a unique experience and unique interactions. And that's what we want to continue to have as we move forward. Next slide. So we took all this information and looked at, well, what are some of the gaps in the existing park system? And here we've just captured a few of the sort of overarching ones, but we went through and identified a number of them. So one of the things is people wanted to see more shade in your parks, existing in any future parks. They wanted to see more seating opportunities, a variety of different kinds of seating. Make sure there's an opportunity to interact with the natural environment. Create gathering areas, spaces where people could casually meet other people, or even bigger spaces that maybe you could have impromptu events and things happening. lot of discussion of multi-use paths. People like to be able to move through and around the parks, multi-use flex spaces that could be, used for a variety of different experiences and also adapt as we evolve. All abilities play, really much more recognition of the need to provide more inclusivity elements in our playgrounds. That's one of the deficiencies that was seen in Belmont. And I think a lot of people have recognized that we've heard a lot of discussion about providing more dog parks in Belmont. Strong interest in a pump track, particularly at the youth group that were able to participate. And then at the opposite end, in pickleball, and some of our more mature adults requesting that. So these are some of the things that we'd like, that even though you have a wonderful park system, that the community would like to see added to even have a better park system. These are sort of some of Belmont's priorities, just a few of them. Next slide. So we're going to take a little pause here for a second to see if you have any questions. And then I'm going to get into sort of some of the ideal Belmont standards. So what would happen, let me just finish with this slide and we'll take a pause. So we took all this information and we said, so what are the amenities that Belmont needs to currently add to their park system to really meet their community expectations? So the first column, when you see 2021 and you see 2035 in each one of these clusters. So 2021 is what you need currently. 2035 is what you'd need to add if you want to continue to meet your current standards or your idealized standards as Belmont grows to meet sort of the population that's projected with the general plan. So the first group, we looked at things where we could benchmark them, where we did the comparisons to other communities and sort of created standards based on what Belmont wanted and maybe their higher standards than adjacent communities. Then the second column were priority amenities, things that Belmont said they wanted, but there weren't necessarily standards that we could compare them to. So we created standards for Belmont that are unique to Belmont. And finally, secondary amenities were some of the not as high a priority, but still things that were very desirable to the public. So we go through that. So today, to meet the Belmont idealized standards, you would need to add an all abilities playground. So take one of your existing playgrounds and redo it. You need to have one multi-use athletic field, 3 play elements. Now, this is where we actually got into defining things for Belmont. We defined a play element and a playground. So a play element might be in a small park where we add a swing or a teeter-totter or some small kind of thing, whereas a playground is a full-scale playground experience that you might have in different kind of parks. So we wanted to make sure that we were clear on what our expectations were. Like to see some more small reservable picnic area and another large reservable picnic area. High demand for reservable picnic. And then tennis courts, we'd like to see a couple more. And we're looking at tennis courts are joint use pickleball courts too. In Belmont, we defined that way. Another community garden, another dog park. And then dog parklets are sort of more informal, still off-leash dog areas, but they might be a smaller area or not as developed as a whole big, huge dog park, but still meeting some of that local dog park needs, maybe of the local neighborhood, as opposed to a community dog park. A pump track, a skate park, water play, a pool, that's been known for a long time. You'd like to see a pool, maybe a spray park destination, some fitness equipment, teen outdoor spaces, a lot of, a place where teens felt comfortable. So those are the kind of things that currently it would be great to add to the Belmont system. And then as you go back, so before you, as you build out, you're going to need to add a couple more athletic fields and a few more basketball courts and another tennis court. So this is sort of the standards to which we're aiming for now and in the future. And so what we do is we take these standards and then we look at your existing park system and the future opportunities that we have, and we figure out how we can create a strategy for how to accommodate these needs within your existing and future park system. So that's where with the next second half of this presentation, we'll be getting into sort of some specific recommendations for some specific parks. We're not going to go through all the parks, but just to show how we would apply that. But as I say, I'm going to take a pause right here for a second. If anybody has any questions of how we got to identify where some of the gaps and needs and expectations of the park system were. You can, I guess you can raise your hand. I'm really talking primarily to the committee because I'm asking the public to hold their questions to the end. So if do we have any hand raises or questions by the committee? Because if
yes,
not,
we've
okay.
got Craig Michaels and Ula Thor.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I don't know who had their hand first. Craig, you want to go first?
Oh, it's okay. We'll let you go. That's
okay.
Okay, thanks. Just two quick questions. In your tennis court count, does that include Carlmont? Because they're not a part of our joint use agreement.
We included parks that were already in there, and part of our strategy to meet this is making joint use agreements. So we're saying, if you don't already have a joint use agreement, we would not include it as something you have, and we'd say you need 2 more. And then when you get to it, our strategy to meet it will be to do a joint use agreement. So that's kind of how we've done this. So it's clear when you do something, you get it.
Okay, so Carlmont tennis courts are currently not included in that count. And then the volleyball court as a secondary amenity, is that, I'm assuming that's an outdoor court since we're talking about parks?
Yes, we're only talking about outdoor facilities right now.
And, okay, thank you.
So thank you. We need clarifying questions because it's like, so much information. Thank you very much. So, Craig?
Yeah, thanks. This is really helpful in terms of the framing of things, so I appreciate that. One clarifying question first. When you did the arterial map of pedestrian and bike stuff, that is all handled from existing city plans. This is not, there's no addition that you're applying to that. You were just kind of giving an overview of the connections that are planned from the city. Okay.
At this point, that's right. There was a pretty in-depth study done to do that, and yes.
That's fine. The other thing is I'm just trying to reconcile this, what you have up, which, I mean, one outlier seems almost honestly as an anomaly, which is the handball and the horseshoe pit saying, oh, that's 2035, but everything else is 2021. And on the far left, it sounded as if the far left was accounting for demographic and population changes as to meeting a particular mark. And is that correct?
That's right. So based on the general plan, your population is supposed to add I can't remember exact count, but a certain amount of people by the year 2035. So it's to illustrate that if we added all these things but in order to maintain that standard, you'd have to add some more things. So that's a represent that you're hitting a standard now, but you'd have to add another. If you added 2 small picnic areas now, you'd still have to add 1 more before 2035.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it'd be helpful to annotate that, because the other 2 columns don't seem to have that as a basis of why is everything in 2021.
Right.
It's because everyone wants it now, which is really fine. But I still don't know why, like, a handball court, that's 2035. It either should be like all now, or there should be some kind of framework to whether it's land acquisition or it's prioritization of, generally because of usage or other types of things. It just kind of stuck out to me as weird.
No, and that's good to ask the clarifying question. So part of the thinking here is currently people are happy with the number of, say, bocce courts they have right now. But if you want to continue to keep them happy, when you add another 10,000 people, you'll have to add another one. So that's where we're working to. So they're currently happy with the number, but you'll create it as you add more people, there'll be too many for their number that you have. Okay.
I would somehow note that because it just seems
right.
Okay.
And hopefully when you read like we've obviously taken this, 100+ page document and boiled it down to a few slides. Hopefully that's clear. If it's not clear, please make a comment, because it's, yeah, we tried to take a lot of information and put it in a few slides to walk through here. So thank you for that comment, though. Yes, it's always important to figure out how we communicate.
That makes more sense. And the last comment also, and I'm sure it's in the document, some of the items are very large, kind of community plus plus type items. Like, for example, skate park, right? There's a skate park in San Mateo. And so it'd be helpful to know, like, is this as if we were our own kind of island, or is this, you know, how do we reconcile with, like, what's the perimeter with which, or that is acceptable to access, right?
Right.
Like to highlight, there's a skate park next door. We don't think it serves enough for us, therefore we want it. And so
Right.
helpful to know that.
Right. Yeah, and yes, and that's exactly what you said is correct. It's like, you know, and there is a lot of that sharing back and forth. I think that part of the reason you have such high field standard is because you guys generously share with some of your other communities too. But we assume that you want to keep doing that. But in terms of the greater area, you need a skate park, you know, in terms, and particularly because a lot of times it's a youth age group that, you know, can't drive a long ways to get to these, that kind of thing, you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have 3 more. So I'm just going to go in order that I saw them raised. Susan, Austin, and Sam.
I think Austin was actually in front of me.
Oh, was he? He might have just popped up on my screen. Well, you're talking now. You go.
Oh, okay.
Austin.
All right, I'll go. Just wanted to clarify on this page that we're looking at. Are these all assuming that these amenities would happen within current park space?
Yes.
Or would some of, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So part of what we looked at is a strategy to or at least city-owned space or opportunities with school districts where it's joint use agreements. So it's like achievable, right? Now,
Right.
when we get to the second column, 2035, there's some elements that come in there that, you know, as a village specific plan develops out and such like that, that then we will be able to accommodate in parks that come online as you grow. So yeah, we didn't want to create a situation where we create a recommendation of something you should do now and you actually, there's no place to put it. At least that was our strategy in sort of creating an implementation vision with our recommendations for the different parks, was some way to fill this need. As I said, either through joint use agreement, rethinking a use at a park or something like that. It's achievable for you from a existing park system or available land that's publicly owned.
Right. Okay. Could you
Yeah.
go back a few pages to the map that showed the know,
watershed.
how close you are to a park thing?
So I think it's 3 more back.
Yeah,
Slide
I think
number-
it's this one. Yeah, so I guess that's what my question. I
Slide
live
6.
in. Okay, I think it's this one that I was thinking of.
There.
I live in the gray north where it's nothing's close.
Right,
And
yeah,
so
exactly.
that's where I just wonder in how you're assessing that. You're really thinking of these things holistically, like in general, people have this happening, but it seems like because I can imagine land acquisition is not really on the docket, most likely you're really going to be looking at bumping up amenities and current things. That's kind of what I'm asking, versus being able to put something in places where there just isn't anything. That's what I'm understanding the strategy to be.
Well, and as we go through, and I'll go through the specific strategy for accommodating, we actually, turned out there were some smaller spaces that the city owned that we maybe could act in some of those areas. Not going to make it completely covered, but I also want to share that this is a 5 to walk. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So you're doing pretty well. So we drove to find some places the city had some existing land that we might be able to close that gap with, and then looked at those parks and trail system. You can see they come up into the gray, so maybe it's connecting it better to a park. So yes, recognizing. But part of what we want to do is do something that truly you can implement, as opposed to, you need to add another park out here, like go find land, you know. It's like, we really want to sort of leave you with a roadmap of how to get there. That's one of the important things I think that we've been trying to do. And frankly, you're in pretty good shape in a lot of ways. So I think that we've been able to, I can't underestimate how much the staff helped us with this, to find strategies to address all these needs and to do that in a way that felt like it's implementable. So
Yeah. So last question / comment. I wonder, you benchmark these in terms of we're being in good shape according to the neighboring cities that you mentioned. I'm just remembering back to when I was on the Parks and Rec Commission, and I was on the ad hoc committee for the Davy Glen Park, and at that time there was a metric or something that was being used to say what, I guess, proximity to parks and that sort of thing. And it seemed like Belmont as a whole, if you weren't counting our open space, was really low on parks. And so I don't know what metric that was, if it was a national thing or whatever, but.
Okay, so we have park land versus park amenities. So in terms of the amount of acres you have in parks, if you didn't have some of your joint use agreements like that, but Belmont's been smart. And it's sort of an interesting thing because we're running with this more and more cities. It's experience over parkland. What's the point of having a parkland if you don't have amenities people want? So Belmont's been very smart about, with limited parkland, still being able to provide quality access to recreation amenities. So that's the difference. So we've been creating standards for the activities versus just saying, there's a 5-acre park with a big lawn in it kind of thing.
Okay.
So you guys are being very efficient with your parkland. It's about the experience, not just the quantity. Quality over quantity.
Okay. Thank you.
Austin, maybe?
All right, I'll give it a shot. Can we move to the slide that showed the comparison to other communities, where we are in relation
The
to
benchmarking one?
benchmarking? Yeah. So do we have
That slide.
this one? It's perfect. Yeah, right here. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. And this is probably an ongoing conversation, but do we have an idea of the volume of use or users that interact with our basketball courts, playgrounds, or tennis courts, or other things like that, in projecting like what our goals are for 2035 and thinking about basketball courts specifically? Might we already be where we should be by 2035 because our community isn't engaging with that resource as much as they would, it's already significantly more than we need now, right? So maybe we don't need to have as many basketball courts at all. It would still accommodate a lower number and meet our need for the community and do other things with that space.
And that is a possibility. And a lot of your basketball courts needs also get met through some of your joint use agreements. So that's, but when looking at some of the parks, we recognize that it's easy to accommodate like that through some of your joint use agreements. But that's an interesting point to consider.
Yeah.
People are happy with what you have now. It's a possibility we could lower our standard. We could lower our standard for basketball courts.
I was just thinking about that. And if we do we have as a city, do we have a decent idea of how much traffic there are in these current amenities, or is that something that's sort of an ongoing, or it's hard to get our arms around?
Well, if I could jump in here, I think that's a good question, Austin. I think it might be helpful, particularly for basketball courts and maybe playgrounds, to actually make the distinction between Belmont-owned and school facilities, right? We really don't have any say over what might happen with the school facility, but it might be helpful to identify where we are benchmark-wise with just city-owned basketball courts, for example, and then see how those are used, such that maybe they could be converted to a multi-use, some kind of a multi-sports court, or if they're big enough to put pickleball there, that might help us solve some of our other needs as well.
Yeah,
So
I'm thinking
I
about
think that's a good question.
I was gonna say, thinking about school playgrounds specifically, like I know they're massive and they're open almost like all the time after school hours on afternoons and weekends. So those are essentially part of the community access, right? So maybe we don't need a whole lot more of those gigantic options, right?
Yeah, and your parks, like you use the JA. So yeah, I think that's good. We should, and I think actually in the document, we may have both those comparisons, like you just compare them to what the city owns and then with the JUA. As I said, we kind of consolidated hundreds of pages into, you know, a 25-page PowerPoint. But that's a very good comment. I like that. That's very insightful. Thank you. And I think there was one other person, Kelly, who had their hand raised. Two other, okay. Sonia?
Yeah, Sana, I have a question about, earlier you were talking about how a lot of these amenities were in response to things that youth would want. I know that we had a focus group for the youth. I was wondering if there are going to be more, if there was more opportunities for youth input, because I think that people have things to say and a lot of them couldn't make it on that specific day. So I was just wondering if there's like a way for them to submit their opinions, or if there's another kind of focus group planned.
So a couple of responses to that. Yes, we would love their opinions, and they can go online and just submit comments about that in general to do that, or, you know, email us or such like that. Also, one of the things is, as we move through some of the strategies for addressing the you know, accommodating some of the deficits within the existing park system, we've suggested different changes and improvements to different parks. However, before the city does any changes at a park, there would be focus group meetings related to that park. So people should not think that something that's proposed in this plan, like if we show a little bubble, that's where it's going to go. It's suggesting the range of programs of uses that might be able to be accommodated in that park, but nothing would happen without outreach meetings specifically related to that. So that might be, you might have people who want to generally share like what teens are looking for in a park system, but also they should continue to follow. And when, you know, Cipriani comes up to look for, you know, some updates to it, participate in meetings about that to really specifically focus on the kind of tables they want and where they should be located and the widths of paths. So really the city would love to hear from youth, because it is one of the user groups we want to make sure is using our park system. So yes, we'll take things now, we'll take things later, in any way people want to do it. I don't know that we have a specific secondary focus group plan, but that could be an option if we need that.
Okay, thank you. Because a lot of the youth I've spoken to seem to want to have like zip lines or parkour courses, and so I was wondering where they could just.
Okay.
Thank you.
So please put and what's nice about if they comment on the website, it gets written and it gets recorded and it's part of the document. So it's really, it's well documented, that desire, which would be wonderful.
Thank you.
We have one other committee member.
Me, right? Karen? Yeah. I
Okay.
wanted to,
Hi.
hi. Just wanted to say, Austin, one thing you said about the schools, the playgrounds being open, most of the schools have licensed childcare. Footsteps or some other childcare, and we're there till 6:15. And so they're not open to the public. We're required to be exclusive use. So after 6:15 and all day on the weekends they are, but during the school day, after 3, they're not open to the public. And then we're having a lot of issues with teens at the schools, climbing on the roofs, and there's just been a lot of vandalism in the last few weeks. And so if we could find a place, great spaces for teens, like she suggested, with some interesting things for teens to do, then maybe they won't be using the schools' roofs and the schools as their playgrounds, because that's what's happening in Belmont right now. The police rounded up a whole group of teens on Friday, and they were shooting off firecrackers and shoot on the roof, and they had parts of cars. It was very strange on the playground. So I really think there is a great need for something for teens that is something that's meaningful and something that they want. And I think the more input you get from them, the better. Thanks.
I agree. Thank you. Good insights. So anyone else in the committee want to have a comment they want to share right now? If not, then we'll continue on to share like sort of some of the, how this all translates into a potential strategy. I want to keep saying potential strategy for accommodating all these recommendations. Okay, so our recommendations are across the spectrum. You know, in some cases you have existing master plans like Barrett Community Park, Twin Pines Park. They have existing master plans, and if you would implement those master plans, they would address some of the current deficiencies that have been identified. They accommodate those. You have other parks that are actually in pretty good condition, and we may want to do some minor improvements, add some shade, add a little seating, but overall, they're in pretty good shape and they're pretty well utilized and reasonable. You know, you can see here, it's College Glen, Davy Glen. Those are kinds of some that fall in that category. And we went out and did an assessment and we have some recommendations, but not huge changes there. Then you have some parks, you know, Alexander, Belmont, Bell Alameda, et cetera, where we're proposing to add a new amenity into that park or make sort of a significant upgrade. So there is a little bit of change that would be happening in that park. So they fall into the sort of upgrade or new amenity category. Then you have what we call the park redesign. We don't think they need to change or have a change in use. The uses that are there are appropriate, but maybe we need to rethink the layout, maybe to provide greater access, to create better relationships between different amenities, to just improve things. So Cipriani, Hallmark, and Hastings sort of fall in these categories where we suggest sort of like a sort of remaster planning them, to sort of really look at them, but not necessarily needing to change the uses. We have a couple of parks in the park system that are undeveloped, and Hidden Canyon and Ralston Ranch fall into that category. They're shown as parks, they're counted as parkland, but they're really undeveloped. So we part of this master plan draft recommendations, we've suggested some potential uses for those. We're actually also proposing to hold some focus groups around Hidden Canyon and Ralston Ranch currently, because we are proposing to add uses to a park that's basically been undeveloped. With the other ones, we're making recommendations, and I said before that prior to anything happening in any of those parks, there would be community meetings held specifically focused on the improvements to that park. This is a very sort of overarching approach in a citywide master plan. And finally, there's some new park opportunities, and this was mentioned about how we might, there's some city-owned land that we might use to fill in some of the watershed, you know, the walkability watershed map gaps, or address some of the uses that are difficult to accommodate in other places. So what I'm going to do tonight, sort of in the interest of time, we're not going to walk through every park. We're just going to walk through the ones that are sort of highlighted so people can see sort of the kinds and types of recommendations we have. And then I want to encourage people then to go onto the website to review the whole document and to make comments about any and every park that's near them. But there's sort of, you know, we wanted to say that there's this level, the spectrum of recommendations we're making that are all different levels. So that some are major, some are minor, some are rethinking, and sort of walk through that a little bit with you. So next slide. So as we mentioned, you have some existing master plans like the Barrett Community Park, Twin Pines Park, and if you implement these master plans, you would meet a lot of the needs gaps, like you get a swimming pool. The synthetic field would allow you to accommodate some of your athletic field needs. One of the things that happens when you convert an existing field from turf to synthetic field, you actually get greater hours of use. So it doesn't really double the number of fields you have. We often count it like a field and a half. So you increase that. So if you took two natural turf fields and converted them to synthetic turf, it'd like be picking up an extra field because you can just schedule it more intensely than you can with a natural turf field, you know, a little splash park. So by implementing the Barrett master plan and the Twin Pines master plan, you actually check off some of the deficiencies that we identified for the Belmont community. Next slide. So then we talked about in some of the parks, we're proposing not only upgrading it, but adding some new amenities. So like Bella Alameda, this is one of the parks where we thought it would be nice to add sort of a teen outdoor space, some use that they felt would, so keep them from climbing on the roofs at the school, I guess is the idea, but add some of those sort of very teen focused amenities, some fitness equipment, loop paths, things that would just enhance the experience. The learn to ride loop might be set up for young people to know, like with stop signs and different things. So you can, because now that we have these bike paths in Belmont, we want to make sure everybody knows how to ride a bike. So these are some of the recommendations that we're having for Bella and Meta to meet some of the deficiencies in the park system. Next slide. So the next slide we're looking at is Belmont Sports Field. And so one of the big ideas was just to take the pump track and put it out here at the Belmont Sports Fields. And then we also wanted to create sort of a little bit more gathering spaces. It's a very popular park used by a lot of people. Wanted to create some gathering spaces there, enhance the picnic areas, convert some of the fields to synthetic, as I said, to sort of begin to meet the gaps in athletic fields. So we can have more use of the fields. So these are some of the kind of recommendations we're looking for the Belmont sports fields out here. Next slide. Is O'Donnell. And what we are looking at in O'Donnell is actually, I'll wait for the slide to come.
Can you not see it?
So at O'Donnell, and this is it. Yeah, we can see it now. So in O'Donnell, we wanted to add some reservable picnic areas. Remember, that was one of the deficiencies we had. And we also are talking about spray elements. Like this isn't a whole spray park, but maybe it's like one water play element, and maybe look at converting one of the existing paved areas to accommodate a spray element there. So and adding some barbecue. So these are some deltas that we had, and then obviously just doing some enhancement. Once again, as I said, we wouldn't do anything in this park without holding community meetings to talk about these uses there specifically. But once again, this is a strategy of how we can distribute different kinds of needs across the existing park system to meet sort of current demands. Next slide. So I'm going to just keep talking as it's slowly loading the next slide. So we mentioned that there's two parks that are part of the park system. One is Hidden Canyon and the other is Ralston Ranch that currently are not developed. And so we looked at these parks, and for Hidden Canyon, we came up with a couple of ideas of how we might make it a more useful park experience. So we could perhaps at Hidden Canyon, create locate the community garden there, add a small restroom there, maybe outdoor classroom space to run some of the nature programming. The city has a lot of camps and things that they do there, a small gathering space for local residents, picnic area and such, and also some kind of special signage that might demarc the open space system. So come up with a thematic kind of signage system that would be universally used throughout Belmont to sort of designate access to the open space. So as I said, we came up a couple of alternatives for potential uses of Hidden Canyon. On the second slide, we, instead of looking at so it's the next slide, Kelly. Instead of looking at a community garden and sort of outdoor classroom space for maybe summer programs and camps, we talked about adding a small dog park area that would be sort of available to the local residents. And are we gonna just slowly changing? And so it would be available to the local residents, would be a dog park area. We talked about adding a couple of parking areas and adding some landscape enhancements. Once again, sort of picnic and a permanent restroom that are in both alternatives. And the idea is we'd like to be having sort of a focus group with the neighborhood and Hidden Canyon, sort of chat with them about these ideas we have for developing that park and maybe get some of their other ideas for developing the park. And we've got some focus group meetings already scheduled, and we'll be sending out invites to that local neighborhood to talk about developing the Hidden Canyon Park. Also, another park that is owned by the city and counted as parkland, next slide, Kelly, is Ralston Ranch. And so we sort of started thinking about how could we improve the Ralston Ranch to sort of become one of those neighborhood parks, but keeping it really neighborhood focused. So at Ralston Ranch, we talked about adding sort of maybe a play element like a swing set, some picnic tables, seating area, and then maybe in some of the open space area to create an off-leash, fenced off-leash dog area, but really not, you know, with the special surfacing and such, but more sort of a open space kind of dog area that's fenced. That would be really some place that the local neighbors could come to, you know, let their dog run in the evening, maybe meet friends, use, you know, have their children enjoy a swing and have some walking paths and such, so that they could begin to enjoy this area, but not and develop it super intensely, so that it stays fairly neighborhood focused. Next slide. And so then we also have what we call park opportunity sites. So these are not designated as park sites right now, but there are some city-owned parcels, and that's just to help show how we're trying to close the gap and sort of some of the gray areas where there's small city-owned parcels that we're talking about, you know, maybe enhancing to improve neighborhood access to a tier 1 neighborhood park. And then out at the Caltrans station, you know, those sort of vacant lot parcels that are city controlled right now, to locate some of the more intense uses that often are difficult to put in the neighborhoods because of, you know, sort of user conflicts. So next slide. So we talked about if we develop the Caltrans area, so this is the area as you're entering the city right before you go underneath the Caltrans track, is a wonderful placemaking opportunity to have some kind of welcome to Belmont use. This would be, so we're talking about on the lower side to create a skate park for youth, do some enhanced planting, some public art in that area. And on the upper side, it would be fun to, you know, so you see the placemaking to maybe get some, you know, those ocean going containers and some lights outside and kind of create a partnership that you have sort of an outdoor kind of dining gathering space adjacent a dog park in that area. So it's really become sort of intensely and vibrantly used in this downtown location and meets a lot of the current needs that we have. So it actually hopefully would be beneficial to the local businesses to have, this would become an anchor and a destination where people come here for the skate park or the dog parklet and patronize some of the local businesses around here. Also, as the downtown starts to redevelop and you get more housing down there, starting to meet some of the recreation needs of that future user group. So to some of this is city controlled, some of it would be interim. And so we're looking at things like a dog park or like the container things that could in the future be, you know, be converted to something else, but at least it activates what's a really important sort of first impression to the community and meets a lot of current community needs. Next slide. So we up on Oak Knoll, there's a sort of cul-de-sac area that's owned by the city. And we talked about, you know, maybe putting a play element there, some seating in there, enhancing the landscape. So this could be sort of a, once again, a little tier 1 local neighborhood park that gives access in this area that is really underserved by parks, access to some of the interaction with nature, opportunities to socialize and opportunities to, you know, meet with each other. So that's one of the things we're thinking about. The Oak Knoll area is an opportunity site. And the next site is open. Go to next slide, Kelly. Is up on Alameda de las Pulgas. There's sort of a triangle of land that's owned by the city. that we could enhance once again with a play element. So it's not a full-blown playground, but maybe a teeter-totter, swing, or a merry-go-round, walking paths, seating areas where neighbors can interact with nature and with each other. So once again, these are areas that do not currently have the park in the 5-minute walk shed. So this would add them a park, sort of a neighborhood focus for those neighborhoods. So these are a couple of opportunity sites that we've identified. Next slide. So next steps. We have posted this, the document online. We're encouraging the community to go online to provide their comments. We'll collect comments tonight. We're hoping to hold a couple of neighborhood focus meetings. At this point, we're thinking we should have a focus meeting with the Ralston neighborhood and the Hidden Canyon neighborhood, and we're hoping to hold those in mid-October. We then want to collect all these community comments as well as the draft document and meet with the Park and Recreation Commission and get their input and direction. Maybe if there's additional focus groups they think we need to think about to add those in, but sort of to do that sort of data collection and a pause, take their input and go to the city council and discuss with them how we should proceed forward. As this sort of works through and we get sort of the recommendations get finalized, we'll start talking about ultimately in the plan prioritization, what things need to happen first, sort of an action plan. So once again, we want an implementable plan, and then we want to have a timeline and how we would proceed to move forward. What are the first things we need to do? So this is sort of where we hope to be next year, is with an action prioritization plan. But over the next, few months, we'll be having people walk through these draft recommendations to them and really fine tuning them to meet your needs. So next slide. I wanted to remind people that they can go to the belmontprosplan.com, and when they go on that site, they'll see a thing where it says provide feedback. There's a couple places you can hit the provide feedback, and the document, the draft recommendation document will come up with a place you can fill in your comments and facilitate doing that. But I'm also going to open this meeting now to see if the committee has any more comments, and then we can open it to the public to see if they have any comments.
Can I just ask one thing real quick?
Yeah.
Can we share the dates for the focus group meetings for Ralston?
Oh, yes.
and Canyon?
One more slide. Thank you, Bridget. Kelly, put up the next slide, the neighborhood focus group meetings. Slide 31. So we're hoping to hold the Hidden Canyon Park focus group meeting on October 18th at 6:30, and the Ralston Ranch on October 20th at 6:30. If you go to the Belmont Pros plan and click on like to register, we'll send you the email link and such so that you can, we'll make sure remind you and invite you into that meeting. And if you live in that area, have any neighbors or friends who live in those areas, please let them know this is going on. We'll be sending out mailers to those neighborhoods as well. So with that said, I'd like to allow the committee to share any comments they have at this time. As I said, it's a lot to review. I'm not expecting this to be the only time we hear comments, but if any initial insights would be greatly appreciated. So we'll let the committee, and then we can open it up to the public if they have any comments. So we got some hand raises there.
Mr. Bernstein, then we'll do Ula, then Bob, then Caroline, then Craig.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. That answered a lot of my questions that I had earlier today. But one question I do have, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You have next steps as upcoming community input opportunities, and then the pros plan implementation. I know that the focus of this particular meeting are the parks, and that we spent a considerable amount of time on the open space issue, but I don't see us coming full circle with the open space. So could you give me a little bit of an idea when we're going to come back to that and talk about any recommendations.
Okay, so we met with some folks to discuss sort of how we would proceed with the open space, and there were some sort of technical studies that they requested we prepare. And so we've been trying to work with consultants to get that organized. And so we'll work through to wrap up the recommendations for the parks, but we will not finalize the pros master plan until we bring back the open space too. We will merge these together. We're just sort of, tonight, we're just talking about the parks. So we are still, open space is still very much on our agenda and still being worked on.
Okay, so this won't be the last time we'll see the parks, or is it?
No. You'll see then, so once we get all the comments, we take all the community comments, we go to the Park and Rec, we go to the city council, we get their direction from that, probably, and I don't know, it's sort of dependent, as I said, on getting some of these other studies done. We may bring the open space back to you next, or we may bring the parks back. I don't know which one will come first, the chicken or the egg at that one, but you will get opportunities to see everything again.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just step in on that. So originally when the advisory committee was formed, we had talked about there being 4 advisory committee meetings. As this effort has stretched out a little bit, because open space is going to take us longer to figure out, if the advisory committee is willing and able to stay with us for another meeting or two, that is going to help us kind of come full circle on all of these things.
Okay, Ula?
Yeah, great. First of all, thank you so very much. That was an incredibly comprehensive and well put together and thoughtful presentation. And I know I got so much out of it, and I really appreciate all of the time and effort you put into it. I will try to keep my comments brief because I really want to hear everybody else's impressions and reactions. But I just have a few of my own impressions and reactions. First, and probably the most important, I really appreciated the walkability and rideability map. And I just want to make sure that as a committee and as part of the master plan, I'm hoping that we are not planning to just leave it at that, because I do feel like we have some other opportunities to increase the walkability and the rideability of Belmont. And I think that should remain one of our big priorities. I think it's important that we tie together that 2016 pedestrian and bike master plan, the Ralston corridor project, and maybe bring together a partnership of Parks and Rec, Public Works, the police department, maybe safe routes to school, to really identify the best paths and what more we can do to create safe spaces for walking and riding. So that's just kind of one, probably my biggest overall takeaway. Secondly, just a few of the things, I think I'm really excited about so much of what you presented here, and I'm not going to go into all of the details, but I think the thought at the Belmont Sports Complex about putting the pump track there, and then also better picnic areas and better located picnic areas could be a tremendous asset, because I could see teams having games, and then after the game, instead of going somewhere else, they could all congregate at a better picnic site. And have a little post-game celebration there. So I think that's a great addition. Very excited about some of the thoughts around Hidden Canyon. I think adding parking there will be essential, and I was happy to see that that's included as part of the plan. But I think there's some really creative and exciting uses for that space, and the community I think will benefit in a huge way from some of those opportunities. The skate park, I actually just have a question about the size, and I recognize that this is one of the interim uses of that space, but do you have any sense of like how many kids or how many skaters that space could accommodate? Because it appears to be very small, but I'm just curious if you have any kind of benchmarks from other skate parks, or is there a way to kind of measure use of that space? Because I'm excited about that idea for that space. I just want to make sure that it doesn't end up being so small that it wouldn't really get used. And then just one more quick comment. I love the idea of spray parks. I know kids love spray parks. I just would hope that when we get to that stage, we could consider a way to reuse that water, make it, part of the landscape, or, have it flow. I don't know if it's possible to reuse it, but at the very least, reuse it for the, landscaping watering, just given our current water climate here in California. But that's it. Thank you very, very much.
Bob?
Yes, thanks to everyone. Very good presentation. A lot of work and effort went into it. So thanks for everybody's effort there. Just a question for Linda and Bridget. How will the, I guess, all this information be communicated to the community? There's so much information here. We just, the advisory committee just got this in the last few days, and I'm still absorbing all of it and kind of reviewing it, and I'm contacting a few of my local neighbors and so on. But is there, what is the plan to get this information out to the general Belmont community?
We'll be doing that through, we've got it up on the website. And as I think Linda mentioned in the beginning, this presentation, which provides context for the document that you received earlier this afternoon and a couple of days ago. It's important to kind of get the presentation to explain how we got here. So once that's up and ready for the community, we will be pushing it out on social media and through Nextdoor and all that, encouraging people to take a look at it, take a look at their favorite park, and give us input on that. And the website has a pretty simple form now for where you can just provide input on one particular park and or comments in general. So we're going to be pushing that out again, asking for people's feedback. And we're going to do a little outreach tomorrow night at the movie night. We're not doing any outreach at the Water Dog Run, but we do have some other, holiday events where we can continue to do that. And I'm happy to, have other conversations. If a neighborhood group wants to have a meeting besides these 2 focus groups that we have planned, I'm happy to join and talk about a local park and answer questions that people have. We can do that by Zoom or in person. Happy to do that.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you. First, thank you so much to staff and Gates for this comprehensive plan or these draft recommendations. It's really amazing to see it come into fruition. So first of all, I just wanted to mention some comments about O'Donnell, since that's my local park. I love the idea of having reservable picnic space. I've been on the flip side as a parent, having a party and experienced the anxiety of not knowing if you could have the space or not. So I think that would be a wonderful idea for O'Donnell, especially. I also like the idea of water play. However, like Ula mentioned, I think we're in a drought, so I wouldn't want to see the installation, the money put in to do that at O'Donnell and then have it essentially being turned off every season because of drought. If there's a way to do it to conserve water, that would be great. Excuse me, great. I do have some concern with replacing the basketball court there. I walk by the park several times a day, and there are a lot of people on that court. So I would suggest that instead of replacing the basketball court, instead you move the potential water play closer to where the smaller children's playground is. There's a concrete landing there. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds on that, but I think there's an alternative location that would be more appropriate. With respect to the sports complex, I love the ideas that someone already mentioned of having the picnic area for the sports teams, for parents to come together. That would be wonderful. And I like the idea of the pump track being down there as well. I like it being close to the marsh. I know in Foster City, they also have one that's close to the Bay Trail. My only concern would be about access. The sports complex is very busy, especially on the weekends with games. And so if you're going to have kids in mountain bikes and things like that, I think we need to be careful about the access to get to the pump track. Make sure that there are separate ways if possible, so you don't have everybody on that new track trying to navigate the different games and uses. And then finally, with respect to Old County and Ralston, I love that idea of activating that space. I walk also by that all the time and wonder about the potential uses, and it's so nice to see all the ideas that Gates offered. I love the idea of the tiny parklet and then the lights, things like that. I think would be wonderful. We have 2 multifamily projects that have been approved, one at 815 Old County and then the Artisan Crossings. And I think it would be very useful to have that area activated for some sort of park and recreation for any of the occupants of those new buildings. So thank you so much. And I really look forward to hearing the community feedback on this plan.
Okay, Craig, then Lynn, then Susan.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. Just thank you so much. This, all this work and this detail is really great and very informative. The one thing that I know will happen when you get to the final report, but I think would be really helpful even now with in front of the recommendations that you post, is a little bit about the themes and kind of like the thinking. And so even if it was just like a 1-page distillation, how you went through a lot of it through with us, if you posted that would give a lot, I think it would give a lot more context to the fire hose of all the recommendations and really give a lot of the why. And I think that would be helpful to do, or even just post as an addendum or something for folks. And with it, the idea of, are there like new ways of thinking that has come up in terms of what you're doing for us, but just generally, to me also when you speak about the gathering space and the outdoor experience, that could go so many different ways. And ultimately, I'm sure we'll get to the point of what that means, but more to give flavor and context, I think would be really helpful for people to understand, especially just considering, hey, we're sensitive to, the traumas that we're dealing with now, which hopefully won't be for long, but there's long-term implications, positive and negative of what we're going through. And how do we want to reflect that in what we think gatherings are, down the road. And so again, that may be for final recommendations, not right for now. I also think that the notion of like new parks not being like big parks, but how can we, commenting about like small or pop-ups or ways with which that's, I don't think we're losing sight of that. And so just in that spectrum that you gave of existing plans to little changes to, big acquisitions, I think there's something also there, which is, I won't say minor, small acquisitions, but kind of like dual purpose things or what have you, taking parking spaces and making a little pop-up or something like that. The last bit, which I'm hesitant to say, but it's just like when you talk about Hidden Canyon, I feel like that's the one where there's is it park or is it open space? And is it an interface that really kind of makes sure people understand that the intent isn't we're going to bulldoze and put a huge park there, and I think that an acknowledgement of that and an understanding of kind of how much of it of a interconnect it can be and the potential for that, I think is really important. Thanks.
Good comments. Thank you.
Okay, Lynn.
I'm coming. There. Once again, I'm really excited. I love parks and I spent so much time in parks when my kids were little. To follow up on what Ula had said, though, it is so important to ensure that the connectivity between all the parks, it seems like we have all these plans, Ralston Corridor, et cetera. I live up of Hallmark, and while we have so much to do up here, the thought of getting to other parks, it's really intimidating. You just have to drive. I'm not going to walk or hop on the bike, and I'm especially not going to send my kids when they were little, or even myself now, on my bike down Ralston over that lovely bike bridge over 101, then to get to the pump track at Belmont Sports Complex, which I'm a huge fan of pump tracks, and the skate park. But I really want to ensure that we can create some ease of travel, because we really are a community off of Ralston Avenue, and it's really tough and it's not safe to get around, let alone access all these parks. About the skate park, I think it is terrific. I'm intrigued by that location, and I really liked what you said about it. The skate park as a destination, much like a pump track would be. A destination brings people into the area, and we get money because they're going to be buying food and whatnot there. I wish the pump track, once you are at Belmont Sports Complex or along the 101, you're going to take your money elsewhere, but so be it. I'd love to see both of the skate park and the pump track. And lastly, thinking of Hidden Valley and connectivity again, is there a way to factor in a connector from the lake trail or Water Dog Lake into Hidden Valley? I know now you can go down a path, but you have to get out on Carlmont Drive. It'd be nice to maybe, if that's going to be developed, to have a way that's also a trail that would connect the two spaces. So that's it. Thanks again for all your help. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Susan, then Austin, then Scott.
Sure. Thank you. I just wanted to second what Sana and Karen said about maybe taking another pass at trying to really engage youth on this plan. I was in on the focus group for the youth, and I believe there were only 4 kids. And so that was just really hard, but I wonder if there's a way of directly connecting with the Belmont Redwood Shores School District and Carlmont to see if something could be done through them. For instance, if there'd be a couple teachers at every school who could just spend 15 minutes brainstorming with their class, or get them to draw pictures of their local park of what they would like to see, or something like that. I think it's if we could go where the kids already are, and for people who are used to talking with them and getting them their juices flowing, I think that could be really valuable. So I appreciate all that you all tried to do with that first focus group, but I think having a really deliberate partnership with our schools would be very, very helpful in getting those cool ideas so that the kids will want to be at the parks and not on the roof.
Okay, Austin?
I was just going to quickly say that Susan's point about engaging with younger Belmont residents where they are is fantastic. That's a great idea. And then a quick comment I had about in the broader document that you shared before the meeting, our desire to and recommendations for converting natural turf fields to synthetic turf fields. I think this is assumed that we're not going to try to convert all of them, but that was the potential, the proposal in each of the open space fields that we had, was that we could convert this from natural to synthetic. I think there's a lot of benefits to maintaining appropriate balance there between our natural turf fields and the synthetic turf fields for a number of reasons we can talk about later.
Okay, Scott?
Sounds good.
Hi. Wow, I was knocked out by all the great ideas. I went through this the draft plan earlier today, and for my local park, the one that's right next door to my house, which is Alexander Park, there was 2 or 3 ideas that I thought were no-brainers that wouldn't really even cost that much. The first one is just putting a walking path all the way around the grass field. That's always been a kind of there's always been a path there, but it only goes halfway around, and it just would be great for joggers or people with strollers to be able to go all the way around and complete a loop there. And then more trees for shade. Over the years, we've been here 15 years, there's been more trees that have been taken out of the park than put back in. So it'd be great to get some more shade trees in there. As far as Hidden Canyon, I think that stuff looks awesome and real excited about that. The picture that was shown for the play elements, though, with the slide presentation tonight, kind of showed a playground that looked real colorful and plastic and metal. I'd recommend doing something more natural, stone for climbing on, for kids to climb on. something that doesn't stick out. It's such a beautiful area there and so natural. I'd like to, keep that look to it. And then we've got scooter riders, skaters in my house, so they would be super psyched with a skate park. Well, by the time it finally goes in, they'll probably be in college, but that's a great location for a skate park because kids can access it from all over town. They could come from Redwood Shores and get there over the bridge, the pedestrian bridge. Kids could ride down from all over, so a great place for it. Ula mentioned that, is it too small of a spot? I don't think so. There's a great skate park in Half Moon Bay that's pretty tiny, but it's efficiently built. It's if you design a skate park well, it can go in a smaller area and kids will love it. So thanks a lot for all the great ideas. This is super exciting.
Great. So I
Thank you.
no more panelists have their hand raised right now, but we do have one attendee. So I'll give you permission to talk. It just says call in user 1. Hopefully.
Before we go there, can we?
Oh, hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Sure.
Yes.
Can you hold on for 1 second? Why don't we get a
Sure.
sense for how many folks want to comment, and then we'll kind of see what sort of time limit we can give to our speakers. So for everybody that wants to comment,
so
if you want
if-
to raise your hands.
Yeah, so we can kind of figure that out so we can divide the time up. So if you're in the public and you would like to make a comment at this meeting, please raise your hand.
We've got 4 so far.
And Bridget, this is Thad. I'm on a cell phone, so I'm not on my computer,
Okay,
so I can't raise my hand.
okay. All
Okay,
right,
so 5.
We've got 4
So-
right now.
okay, plus Thad might be 5, okay. All right, so then why don't we go with 2 minutes each, max, and then if other people want to raise their hand, we can do that. So go ahead, whoever, speaker number 1, go ahead. Was that you, Thad?
Yes.
Might be. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Hi. I'll go ahead and start. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys. This is a lovely, wonderful, exciting conversation, and I just feel so much positive energy coming out of everybody on the committee. So thank you all very much, and thanks, Gates, for putting together such a great presentation. I'm actually standing right now at the Belmont Sports Complex, a successful example of a beautiful park, full use. I'm watching like 6 different games going on right now, about to pick up my kids. So that's just a wonderful example of what we can achieve. I think the most important thing I wanted to bring up tonight is actually what Ula had to say. I think she kicked it off nicely about the connectivity. We don't want to stop with our current maps. We want to grow connectivity for bicycles and for pedestrians so that we can reduce our reliance on cars. You know, the climate change thing, which we haven't actually overtly expressed, can be addressed with our master plan. And I think if we can find ways to get people safely, comfortably to a wide variety of locations throughout the city, we'll do a much better job at reducing car reliance. And we want to bring up the next generation of people who don't just reach for their car keys. So I think that's the most important thing I wanted to point out. The last thing I wanted to say was, thank goodness we finally made Hidden Canyon unhidden. This has always been supposed to be a city park. And although it's next to open space, it's actually a very large area for city park. So I'm so glad we're able to talk about that also. That's it for my comments.
Thank you. Okay, Tim, I'm gonna allow you to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So there's a lot of great work. The perspective that seems to be missing is the biggest part for me. It's about here, the backyards or islands of human space, which are connected by cars, perhaps in future also by walking or biking, as if there was no city or no community. This thinking continues what Belmont is today. We know we have one of the worst cases of entrenched car culture. You drive to attractions, and by the way, the better ones are outside of Belmont, so it's more about getting out. There was a village culture here before it was rolled over. What I'm saying is missing is seeing the whole of Belmont as a park, the holistic perspective, where we enjoy not just being at home or in a park, but in Belmont, in the public space. on streets, in between, on the way, perhaps that's 80% of public space. And I for sure would not agree to cede it voluntarily. An example, do I bike in Belmont or do I drive to open space because that's where you bike? Another example, a pedestrian street like Laurel, well, it's not a park, but it's public space that is a destination like a human park. It seems there's no survey questions about this whole part, therefore also no ideas about it. But where we live really could be a jewel on the peninsula. We have a great topography, Ralston Hall, a whole string of other nice venues just on Ralston, etc. And after the pandemic, people are ready for change and mostly aren't commuting to work anymore. They are so ready to be live and local. More safety, health, quality of life, freedom, higher home prices, local businesses should love it as well. Belmont is an overall park and destination. So in view of time, I just want to say, with the Calmont student team, we found the council, the school district, overall population very open to positive change around this. And also last time I had the sense the commission had a whole range of really great ideas in the same direction. So here's 4 ideas that I think could be implemented really fast and without big cost. Ralston and Alameda, San Carlos as greenways with signage and recognition, a general speed limit of 25 miles per hour, which is going to become possible hopefully soon with AB 43, bike racks, signage, striping, staff bike hut at Barrett, and then programs such as bike valet at all festivals, e-bike programs at the schools, safety, lots of e-bikes events. And so I would strongly suggest to add this largest part of the Belmont public space to consideration, unless it's somewhere else, but I didn't hear that we think of Belmont as a park and where we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Denise, are you able to talk? Denise?
I am. Thank
Okay.
you. All right. So thank you for this presentation and for the upfront information about what the process is, because I have to say, I'm so confused by the process of this master plan, the whole process. So you guys put this information out just a couple of days ago. And I just found out about this meeting this week. And you say you got all these ideas from recommendations from the meetings you've held and that very vague survey that you clearly could not have gotten very good specific information from. So I don't understand how this process is working. I don't think it's transparent. And I don't know how you came up with ideas, for instance, for certain parks, like for instance, the Wakefield Park, which you didn't mention now, but I don't know who came up with these ideas and where'd they come from? And I'm glad you're holding community meetings for the Ralston Ranch and Hidden Canyon, but I think that every community around a park needs to be consulted prior to doing something. Secondly, I'm thinking about the fiscal impacts here. Where's the money coming for all this? I just don't understand unless you plan on taking out loans, I guess. So I just don't know how all of this is possible. And then the time frame that you outlined. First, you said it looked like adoption wouldn't be until, I don't know, late 2022, early 23. And then you're talking about taking something to city council in the short term. So I don't understand, what are you taking to city council in the short term? I would really appreciate some clarification and maybe some on the website, you could give some dates in terms of how this process works and where these ideas are coming from. And aside from submitting our comments on a website, what kind of opportunities we'll have to participate. I saw the 2 that are coming up, but the 2 focus groups for the 2 parks, but I would appreciate a little more clarity. I guess I'm really confused. Thank you very much. And I hope that confusion is not going to bleed over to the open space segment of this, which I know is later, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Austin?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I just want to say that I think a pump track is a great idea, and I fully support that. One comment I had on it though is I think it's important that a pump track is within biking distance for people. So I think it's maybe worth considering if there's anywhere where it could be more centrally located to the majority of the Belmont population, specifically kids and teens, because I think you really want to encourage them to be able to bike to the pump track rather than having their parents drive them there. And additionally, one other comment was, I think it might be worth looking into if there are any nonprofit foundations that could provide grants to help get the bike park built. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another Austin.
Hello, there we go. I'm off mute now. So this is, yeah, other Austin, maybe even the third Austin of the evening so far. Anyway, I grew up in Belmont, so I'm a Belmont local, even though I defected to San Carlos recently, whatever, Belmont's still my destination. Tim Busiek, I think, made a really good point earlier. Belmont parks are destinations. They really are. I like the variety already. I think the study's gone great. I've been part of the feedback process for the last couple of years. Thank you guys for keeping that open to us as citizens. And I just wanted to say real quick on Hidden Canyon, because it's such a natural interface location, it would be really cool no matter what the park becomes to have it like a nature type experience. I've seen parks like in Portola Valley where they incorporate certain trees with certain features like, I don't know, treehouse, climbing bridge, these sorts of things, you know? And we don't have the giant redwoods there. I get it. But it'd be cool to just kind of think of the natural type of theme, make it almost like an educational experience. I think we'd do really well if we started indoctrinating people to like what the area means, you know, to have all that open space. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other raised hands. Oh, one more just popped up.
Hi, my name is Sonia. Thank you for taking my call. I love the plans that you've outlined for the parks and especially the skate park. I like the location and the pump track. I agree that it needs to be bikeable. However, it's a very exciting amenity. The Learn to Bike Park over on the Bellamita Park. But the bikeability, I just wanted to. I loved what the caller earlier said about Belmont being an actual park, and it really is. It's very much has that feel, and so the connectivity between all of these little jewels, a big jewel among little jewels, is really key. And I hope that green striped bike lanes are a part of that, and obviously walkable sidewalks and micromobility accessibility is also prioritized. So thank you for this amazing work.
Thank you. We have any more hand raises, Kelly?
Nope.
Well, I want to thank you guys all for participating. Really had a lot of really insightful comments. I appreciate them very much. I know that I have like 4 pages of notes, and I know everybody else does too. So it's been really helpful. And we would encourage you all to, if you would like to participate in the Hidden Canyon or the Ralston Ranch focus groups, to go onto the website, sign up for those, to provide your comments on the website. And also we will post the dates for the Park and Recreation Commission and the City Council meetings. These will be like study sessions where we basically update them on what's been happening to date. They won't be approving anything at that time, but basically providing us some direction, because we'll be sharing the recommendations and community input. So please feel free to join at that time as well to sort of continue to provide comments. And we will meet with the staff and sort of look at how we can respond even to some of the things we heard tonight.
And I just want to say real quickly, thank you again to Gates for their hard work in putting this together. And thank you to the advisory committee and to the community members that are so passionate and dedicated to helping us deliver a parks master plan that works for everyone. I do want to clarify one thing about the opportunity site that we talked about at Ralston and Old County Road. There is a lot of excitement about the skate park and the other sort of public placemaking space. Linda mentioned it, but I do want to kind of make sure that that everybody heard that what happens in those spaces may be temporary. So on the document, it says it's an interim use. Those are sites that could potentially be developed. You know, sometimes development takes 10 years to happen, but the timelines are changing right now. So I just want to keep people, I want to make sure that we set expectations correctly, that it may be that what we put there is a little more temporary than we would typically do in some other parks. And obviously that would determine the degree to which we want to invest in a space. So again, I just want to temper expectations there and make sure that we're all on the same page about that. But otherwise, thank you all for your participation this evening. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, it's wonderful working with people who have such great, thoughtful comments. It's like, helps us raise our game. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.